And I think we are live. Hello, Bernardo.
Hello, Vesely.
What's up?
I am fine. How are you? Nice to meet you, finally.
Great. Yes. We've been we knew each other on the internet for quite a lot, I think, couple of years, right? But we
Yes.
have never actually met in person or even like that virtually. So it's really great
That's
to see you finally.
nice to hear you are now a YouTuber, finally, a podcaster.
Yeah. Starting my career. We'll see how it goes. So, once again, if I remember correctly, we kind of get to know each other on Reddit. So we had many disagreements there, but they have always been very respectful. And that's why I kind of remember people who disagree with me respectfully. And you've always been one of them. So that's why I kind of followed you. And then I also noticed that you are actually outstanding engineer and you do a lot of stuff. But maybe instead of me presenting you, maybe you will present yourself. Tell me, who are you?
My name is Bernardo. I've been in the Android community since 2017, and that's where I met you. It was very weird. It's always weird to discuss, and it's like, oh my god, he knows a lot more than me, but there are things that I know that he doesn't. So it is very fun to discuss about these development things. There is no right or wrong, so it's very fun always. And after Android, I spent about 2 years in Android, only Android. Then last year I graduated in computer science. I started doing a lot of Flutter development, only for personal projects. And this year I started a master's degree in human-computer interaction, and it's been really fun. At the beginning of the year, I made a website for tracking COVID-19 related stuff, and it was like my first big experience in React and everything else on the web, and it was a nightmare because I spent like 6-7 years away, so everything changed and I didn't know anything anymore. Then after this, I made a Figma plugin to help designers generate code from their design. It was in TypeScript, really fun. I learned something new. After this, I got hired. Now I am working in Flutter again. So it's been a very cycle.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to unpack there, and that's one of the things that kind of amazes me about yourself. You've been a professional Android developer for just 3 years, Android and Flutter, right?
Yeah, Flutter about 1 year.
About 1 year Flutter, and Android about another 2 years. But you actually managed to do a lot of stuff. You touched a lot of technologies, and you have some very cool projects, and we will discuss that, your plugin, but you didn't mention that you also have applications on Play Store, right?
Yes, I have 3 apps on the Play Store, and they go from the exponential scale down. So it starts with my first project ever, which made me become an Android developer, which was named Bible in Sign Language, which was a project to help deaf people access the Christian Bible. So I started Android with accessibility and those things in mind, because it is still very hard to deal with these things today. Then I did an app to check for changes in websites, which is called Change Detection. And from 50,000 downloads, it went to 5,000 downloads. I think nowadays it is at 10 or 15,000. Mm-hmm. The pandemic made a big increase in downloads. And after this, last year, I did an app in Flutter, which is called Color Studio, which should help developers and designers choose colors and preview them in the layout instead of just making, recompiling, and everything. You just choose the color and have a nice preview. You check the accessibility, you check for color blindness, you check for everything, and it should help people speed up their designs.
Yeah, here are your apps: change detection, Biblia, and Libras,
Yeah.
Vec, and Color Studio. 3 applications, 2 of them very high rated. Change detection has 4 stars, and I think that Biblia has a decent number of users as well, right? It's
Yeah,
it 50,000
has
plus
50,000,
downloads.
yes.
So I would say you are a very experienced developer. It's especially interesting given that you've been in mobile world just for 3 years. It's crazy fast career. And now you do a lot of Flutter. And that's actually why I wanted to talk to you specifically. Because as far as I can tell, you are like one of the best guys to talk about Flutter. Because you've been Android developer, and I remember the article that you wrote. I don't remember the title, but it was something about pain points when adopting Flutter, right?
Yeah. It was very weird.
You are a Flutter developer right now. So
Yeah,
tell us about this, your experience in adoption of this new technology.
So I made an article last year, which was like my pain points, everything that I am frustrated about Flutter right now. And it was something like, oh, I'm going to put in Android dev, and the people that I know are going to read, and that's fine. But then it exploded. It went like #1 in Hacker News. It was posted everywhere, and people started complaining like, "Oh, this is too personal. This is wrong. This is right. Half is good, half is bad." And I was like, I wasn't expecting this so much visibility. I think it had more than 100,000 views. So it was like too much. I still didn't read all the comments. It was too much stuff. There were more than 400 comments, I think. So, but at the end, Flutter has many weird stuffs, weird things. Flutter is weird. A few days ago, I opened an issue in Dart because there was something that I was trying to do. Mm-hmm. And from TypeScript, like I could do in TypeScript and I couldn't do in Dart. And they replied like, "Hey, you are right. This is a bug in Dart," and close it as intended. So I was like, if it is a bug, it shouldn't be closed as intended. It makes no sense. So I have a lot of these issues with Flutter and Dart and the Flutter team. There are some politics, I think, also. I made my Figma plugin, which converts layouts in Figma, Tailwind, which is kind of CSS, and SwiftUI. And the Flutter, it was the #2 post in Flutter subreddit ever. But no one from the Flutter team ever commented, ever liked, retweeted, nothing. So I have some issue with them, or they have with me, I think.
But yeah, it's very difficult to be, basically, first of all, you're a Flutter developer, right? You write applications in Flutter right now professionally.
Yeah,
so I think
it will be
since 2 weeks ago. And you have one of your own apps on Google Play.
Yes.
Flutter. So I would assume that you actually liked Flutter if you made this transition from native development to Flutter. And you wrote a plugin for Flutter, right?
Yeah, I like Flutter. It is not like something bad. It is just not something good yet. But it is better than everything else. So I've had a project many years ago, I think it was 2017, when I was starting in Android, which I was doing for Android. Then I started, it was only myself. I was in Android, then I started doing in iOS, and then I figured it out that I was taking like twice the amount of time to to rewrite everything in Swift, and then everything that I did in Swift, I needed to do it back on Android. And there were libraries in Swift that didn't exist in Android. For example, forms. It is still very hard to make forms.
You basically discovered what pretty much every company who launches mobile product on both platforms discovers at some point. Oh, we do pretty much the same thing in two different languages, two different frameworks. So why wouldn't we take something to just do it once? And you actually decided to take Flutter, but you do not show enough enthusiasm about Flutter. You're not like fanboying Flutter. You kind of point out its deficiencies. So you're not the most popular person in Flutter community, I guess. Would that be fair to say that?
Yeah, I am realistic, because I was checking today on the subreddit. People were like, oh, it's so nice we don't have Webpack on Flutter. We can just run our apps and it works. And I was like, okay, that's nice. I hope it keeps that way. But Webpack's not evil totally. Webpack is necessary because there are a lot of things involved. There are a lot of steps to build an app, and Flutter is going to eventually get into the Webpack level. It's just a question of time. Android has Gradle, iOS has pod files and some other stuff. So Flutter is going to get there. There's no reason to get happy yet. Last week, I was trying to format code in Flutter, and they have the Dart FMT, Dart formatter. It's nice. But for example, if I have an expression and I forget the semicolon at the end, it complains, hey, you forgot the semicolon. And why can't it just add the semicolon? In TypeScript, there is a plugin from Facebook, a formatter called Prettier. It adds the semicolon. I never wrote the semicolon in TypeScript. I would just command Alt L, Alt format, and it would add the
well, I guess if your problem is semicolons, then you should have stayed in Android with Kotlin, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe you jumped the boat too early, because now you don't need to write semicolons in Android. That's what makes many people happy.
Yeah, but I have a lot of issue with tooling and kind of stuff, which is very slow is slowly getting better, but too slow in my opinion. And I think eventually Flutter is going to get into what Android is today or iOS. So a lot of these things that people are celebrating are only temporary and are going to end one day.
Okay, let's try to kind of structurize this thing. First of all, when you started with Flutter, in your experience, was it easy? Was it easy to get started, to write your first application? What about, learning resources, documentation, ecosystem of third-party libraries?
Yeah, so when I started, it was still a bit early. It's getting so fast, everything. But resources were kind of bad. The Flutter documentation was not that bad, but the Dart documentation was bad for a lot of things, like, I want to group a list, group by. And it had like the implementation, but it didn't have like, hey, try here. On Kotlin, it's very nice because you can just click and it runs at real time on the web page. So I had a lot of issues, like what is it supposed to do? But it has got better recently. Now they have a lot of weekly videos, widget of the week, and they add on their own documentation. They made a series, I think at the end of last year, about animations, a few 5-minute videos about animations. There has been a lot of congress and talks and conference about Flutter, so there has been a lot of resources appearing about how to do things right. There's a lot of a big issue in Flutter is the state management. There's no Dagger yet. So there are many state development solutions, and people are still trying to figure out what is best, what is worst. And new safety is getting ready now, so it is going to make things easier, but it's still not there. So it is a constant change. But when I started, I did a Udemy course in Flutter, and it helped me a lot. Nowadays,
which one? Let's recommend people, because I guess, today many Android developers, even if they don't admit that, they kind of look at Flutter. Many Android developers already took these courses, but many others kind of look at Flutter. They feel that something about Flutter might affect them in the future. They don't understand why Google promotes two different frameworks basically concurrently in parallel. So if someone wants to start with Flutter, which course did you take, and would you recommend that course to them?
I don't remember the name, but I know Google has kind of bought the course, so it is now free for everyone. You just need to see on Flutter website, they are promoting an Udemy course, and it is free. So I think it's Angela, the name of the instructor. I don't remember.
Angela Yu?
Yeah.
So Google basically paired with Angela, and now Angela's course is free on Udemy?
Yeah. I'm not sure if it is free on Udemy, but if you go through Flutter website, it is free.
I see. So they basically bought her course. Okay, Angela Yu is one. I'm on Udemy. Maybe some listeners won't know, but I'm also post on Udemy, and Angela Yu is one of the top instructors there. She's like a superstar, and her courses are always super high quality. So yeah, I took another course on Flutter. Watched exactly 2 lectures so far, but maybe sometime I will get back to it. So basically, guys, if you want to try Flutter, go watch a course by Angela Yu on Udemy, and now it's free if you go to Flutter website, and you can find it there. All right. So you say that it's kind of immature ecosystem, and there are some things still lacking, but you are a Flutter developer right now. You say that for the past 2 weeks, you've been hired as a Flutter developer. So first of all, congrats.
Thank you very much.
Well, you like Flutter. So except for the fact that it allows you to write one kind of application and deploy it to 2 different platforms, is there anything else in Flutter that you especially like? What's the benefits of Flutter as opposed to Android? What's the strong points of Flutter?
I think the best, the most strong one is the declarative stuff, which we are now getting with Compose. Compose was kind of forked from Flutter, but when three years, I think 2 years ago.
Don't say that Compose is forked from Flutter.
No, it is.
People get offended. Shh. No, I know. They actually just copy pasted the source code initially.
Yeah, but I think 2 years ago, I started refactoring my change detection to use Epoxy, which is a library from Airbnb to deal with lists. And I started, hey, I like this idea of declarative stuff. I didn't even know what was declarative programming and those kind of things, but I really liked it. So I started transforming everywhere in my app into lists so that I could use the Airbnb library to help me out, so I could reuse views and do everything. It was wonderful. But it had still some limitations from recycler views, some bugs. And then I started with Flutter, and it was like, hey, I've seen that before. That's exactly what I like. Mm-hmm. So the best thing about Flutter is it has strong defaults. You can't add a view here, reference it later. You can't do this kind of stuff. You can just do what is right. So it helps you become a better programmer, even if you don't want.
So basically what you're saying is that they have some kind of constraints, right? And many developers don't like constraints, but you are saying basically that the constraints that Flutter team put in place are sane and they actually help you, guide you towards writing better applications, and therefore you can build your apps faster. Would that be correct?
Completely. The idea is simple. You send the data, you pass to the views, and it auto reloads everything that needs to be auto reloaded. So it is very fast. It works very well. And if you have a relatively decent app structure, you have everything done for you. You don't need to optimize. You don't need to add view pool to the recycler view. You don't need to worry about, oh, what if I had 3 linear layouts, one inside another? It was an issue on Android a few years ago. Nowadays on Flutter, you just have to worry about the business logic, and the framework takes care of the UI for you. So that's a big, big, big advantage.
Yeah, Android's UI framework is something, let's call it not the best piece of engineering ever. You mentioned accessibility. I actually haven't worked with accessibility much, but I hate the themes and the style. I don't know how to call that. It's a framework inside framework, right? So Android theming and styling is kind of a framework all by itself, and it's so bad that most of the times I just can't find what I need. I kind of go Google that, and people post individual code snippets. You just copy paste them into your code, and you hope that they work, because I never know how this system works. Never learned it properly.
One nice thing about Flutter is that, okay, it has many issues, it has many incomplete implementations, it is still evolving, etc. But they did like the perfect way in their framework structure. So I've had an issue when I did my Color Studio app, where I needed the sliders to do some things that the original slider couldn't. So I just copied the slider from Flutter and renamed the class to slider2 and changed what I wanted to change. And okay, now I have slider2 working as intended. Fine. On Android, you can't just copy something from the Android library and change and use, because there are many layers. If you go to the slider, you have the app compat slider, then the slider, then the progressive slide, the progressive view, progressive something. Then you have the view framework, and then I think one more level, and then you still have the styles in XML.
Yeah, what you basically say is that Android is a shit show of inheritance. That's fundamental problem. That's not something. It's like basic engineering problem, and it's one of the worst aspects of Android, that everything is built on inheritance. So if you want to do anything, you often find yourself like digging, I don't know, sometimes 5-10 levels deep, and you don't know where each piece of logic comes from, because and sometimes they override each other.
And even if you find what you want, you still have to deal with XML, which is a different kind of inheritance. It is too hard. Flutter, one level, done. So I really enjoy changing things.
Yeah. So basically you say that in Flutter, they got the inheritance part better, and they don't abuse it as much as Android team did.
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, yeah, that's one of my biggest problems with Android. Everything is inheritance based. Okay, one thing, first of all, when I kind of followed your stuff over the months or years, and you're a very different type of developer from me, because I hate UI. Every time I need to do user interface, whatever it is, simple, difficult, no matter, I cry a little bit inside. You seem to like doing user interfaces. Your applications they're absolutely beautiful, stunning applications. You have many libraries on GitHub, something that we haven't mentioned yet, right? And most of them, if I'm not mistaken, also user interface related. and you develop your plugin for Figma, which is absolutely like amazing for a developer to even think about Figma, because for me, I use Figma, I use InVision, I think I use all these systems, but for me, even thinking about developing something for Figma is some a little bit painful. So you work with UIs a lot and you like that. And Flutter, let me bring it up, something that I was very, always very curious about. Flutter, they market themselves, okay, as UI toolkit. So basically, when Flutter just came out, before I read about it, I thought that we are talking about basically replacement for Android UI framework. That was my initial reaction. Okay, so they want to replace Android UI framework. But then I realized that Flutter is more than that, right? So Flutter is basically an entire framework all by itself. And you have networking support there, right? They have libraries for networking. You don't use retrofit if you use Flutter. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Correctly.
Yeah, and basically you have libraries and you have Flutter APIs for everything. So Flutter is not just UI toolkit, it's not UI framework, it's a full-blown mobile development framework all by itself.
Yeah, it is kind of weird because it has dominated Dart. Dart was kind of an abandoned language. People from Google like to say that they still use on Google Analytics, but very, very, very small use case. In reality, Dart was not widely used, and Flutter gave a new life. And nowadays, most of Dart-related development is because of Flutter. So they are doing new safety. They did something very nice, which they named like UI in code, which is if and for in Flutter. So you can have like a list with a for inside in Flutter. It's very weird, but works beautifully. And you can also have like, oh, if this property is true, widget. And it works very, very, very nicely. And it was something that the Flutter influenced with Dart to add because they wanted the widgets to support. So they are very closely related. And so far, I didn't have like a lot of issues with Dart. I know a lot of people complain because it is not Kotlin. I also prefer Kotlin 10 times. I really enjoy Kotlin. But Dart's not bad. It is something between JavaScript and TypeScript. Not perfect like TypeScript, but not doomed like JavaScript. Yeah.
Oh man, you just you want to gather the most hate and the most enemies you can, so you bring them from different ecosystems, right? You want a little bit from Android, you want a little bit of enemies from Flutter, and now you also go after JavaScript, which is basically like the biggest ecosystem in the world.
Yeah, no, but I love TypeScript. Please don't hate me.
Okay, TypeScript. Okay, I think they will forgive you if you say that you like TypeScript. Okay, so basically Flutter is an entire framework all by itself, and when you develop your applications, like from your point of view, did you need to go and I imagine Flutter has some I don't know how to call it, some facility that you can leverage to actually interact with native code. So for example, if there is something very special that you want to do on Android and iOS differently, then you can kind of get out of Flutter and write your actual native code, Kotlin or Java or whatever it is, right?
Yes, this is very nice. So that's a tricky question. I never made my own plugin, but I have used other people that did this a lot. Everybody uses when either they like or not. For example, you want a video player. How do you make a video player? You have the XO player on Android, you have the AV player on iOS, and you have, I don't know, on the web.
So basically in Flutter plugin, when you say plugin, it's not like in Android plugin. In Flutter plugin is a library, third-party library.
Sorry, yeah, a library. Let's call it a library. Easier.
No, you can call it plugin, and just clarifying for people who watch, and I guess many of them are Android developers just like me, don't know much about Flutter.
No, both terminologies are valid, but there are also real plugins, and Flutter lets use library. It is easier.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, you said that people already wrote a lot of plugins and you just use them, and you yourself, you never had to go and just write something like that yourself in your own code.
Yeah, for standard stuff, it works really, really well. For example, geolocation. What it needs? It needs to ask a permission, it needs to get the location and the accuracy. So that's completely fine. The biggest issue on Flutter with those native bindings, I think the only issue is that Flutter, the framework itself, it only draws the view when it's supposed to. So if you have an app in background, you are not drawing any views, so you don't have any code being called. So the biggest issue with Flutter is like, how do you make background tasks? Because you don't have the view on background tasks, it makes no sense. So they are still exploring. I think so far there is no way, at least easy way, to deal with work manager, foreground things. You want to make a music player? Fine. But if you want to tap on the notification to pause, that's still uncharted area for Flutter right now. Everything that you can see, it works fine. If you can't see, it still doesn't.
Well, to be fair, in Android as well, background work is kind of crippled, and there's no reliable solution as of today that works reliably on all devices. Even Work Manager, all these Chinese devices, there's a very popular bug, and there's this website, Don't Kill My App or something, which basically summarizes all these problems. So background work is definitely something very difficult, even on native, let alone Flutter. But one thing, I've had a client recently, they approached me with some project, and this project lended itself very good for cross-platform development because it was a relatively simple application and they wanted Android, iOS, they wanted it very quickly. So I kind of thought, okay, let's see if Flutter is the way to go. And one of the core features inside that application was maps. It was a lot of stuff related to like showing, overlays and stuff. So I went to Flutter, bug tracker. That's the first thing that I basically look for. And I searched for bugs related to Google Maps. And I found that, for example, on iOS, if you have many markers on the map, then the plugin, the library that they use for Google Maps, it will draw them synchronously. So you can have your UI basically freeze for like 10-15 seconds while this thing happens, something like that. So that was no go basically. But you say that geolocation is very simple stuff. So I guess the question is like, if it's something that doesn't involve difficult, complex user interface, right? Then it's simple to bridge this functionality on Android and iOS into Flutter. But once you get into difficult parts like maps is very high, very difficult stuff to kind of abstract out and write one single framework that will work on all platforms. Then you run into troubles, and I imagine, I never looked for that, but I imagine that even, for example, media players that you mentioned, Exo Player and Avio Player on iOS, I imagine that there are some very serious issues there as well, because that's something that in my imagination will be relatively difficult to breach in difficult cases. If you have something simple, you just need to play one single sound, that's okay. But if you actually need to stream audio and video real time, I guess then in Flutter you also might run into very interesting corner cases which don't work exactly as you'd expect.
Yeah, I never tried some edge case with the video player, but the issue with the Google Maps is like Google. So it is a very weird API on Android and on iOS, and they are not even like, hey, we are making something for Flutter. They don't, I believe they don't have the resource to do this. So they are making a bridge trying to make the two APIs work together. But it is very hard because they have something like an intermediary view, which it gets out of Flutter and it just uses the native view from iOS or Android. And I think last time I checked, they had like 200 issues on GitHub about the native view inside of Flutter. It's not ready yet, but I believe one day it will be totally ready, very easy to integrate things from the OS into Flutter and vice versa.
Well, very interesting. And now we have a very interesting question from the audience. So let me just show it. Is it possible to have UI development in Flutter and business logic in Kotlin? And I will add to this question also, in your opinion, if it's even possible, is this something worth doing?
I don't think so. I mean, yes, everything is possible, but the issue is that we are still very, very, very early in those shared things. Even if you go look at just WebAssembly, those kind of things, it is still very simple. Like, oh, you send a function and you get the result back. There are not a lot of interoperability things. So you can just maybe, okay, I want to send to call a Kotlin function and get the value back, but you still can't do like coroutine thing, asynchronous support. You get very, very, very limited. I think on Kotlin multiplatform on iOS, I think. Yeah. You don't even have the types correctly. You have issue setting the types to be what you want. So those things are very early still. I hope one day it will get to the point we can have the whole app in Kotlin and then the UI in Flutter, but I don't think we will get anytime soon. I think Compose will get there sooner, and maybe Compose will work on the web or on iOS eventually.
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, it's not maybe. It's just a matter of time. I mean, it doesn't make sense to work on Compose if it won't cover all the use cases of Flutter. So whenever Flutter, at the very least, Compose will run whenever Flutter works, and maybe even more, because now they port it to desktop at JetBrains. But okay, that's, as you said, in your opinion, in my opinion, we kind of speculate. And that's all right. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you already mentioned Kotlin multiplatform and Compose, do you have any specific opinion about that technology? Have you tried it? Because you obviously tried many different technologies, right?
Yes.
You mentioned just how do you call it? Not Webflow. What did you mention?
Webpack. Webpack.
Not Webpack. Why, I have a blackout. This thing that you can run, like, say, Java code in browser, Kotlin code in browser. What's called?
Kotlin multiplatform.
Okay, it will get back to me. So, Kotlin multiplatform and Jetpack. What's your opinion about that?
I really enjoy. I really hope it gets better. I had a discussion about this last year with, I forgot the name of the person, I think Kevin Callaghan, which is from TouchLab. And
yeah, Kevin.
Yeah, and we were discussing like, hey, I Bernardo am going with Flutter, you Kevin is going with Kotlin multiplatform. Let's see what happens. So each one of us bet in a different direction, and we are both happy still. So I've tried Kotlin multiplatform, but it is still very, very hard. I didn't think, but most of the things that we like on Kotlin, most of the stuff that we do in Kotlin is not entirely in Kotlin, is because of Java. So when you don't have Java, you are suddenly like, what can I do? Where are the functions that I've been using for the past few years? Where is everything? So it's weird because they have the same issue that Flutter has. Flutter is trying to bridge the GPS between iOS and Android, the video player between Android and iOS, the Google Maps from Android and iOS. And Kotlin Multiplatform needs to bridge the APIs from the web, Android, and iOS. So they need to bridge how should datetime work? Should we use the one from Java 8? Should we use the one from iOS? Should we use the one from JavaScript, which is different? How should those things work? How should other, I can't name another one, but everything needs to be rewritten in Kotlin Multiplatform. So they are having the same issue, the same time span.
Even something as simple as, let's say, shared preferences, right?
Yeah.
And in iOS, I think it's core data, it's called? Core data?
Yeah.
The alternative to shared preference in iOS. So, like, even that, something as simple as that, Kotlin Multiplatform will need to reinvent.
Yeah, so they are kind of making bindings for 3 things, which is taking 3 times the work. And Flutter is doing for 2 and maybe 3 when they get into the web. And I think so far Flutter has an advantage. They have been able to get partnerships with a lot of people. They are trying to get partnerships with Microsoft. I'm not sure if they did or if they are still trying, but I think they did a partnership with Canonical for Linux. So with those, it is easy to just find a partnership like, hey, it works on Android, it works on iOS, I want it to look this way on Linux. Fine. For Kotlin Multiplatform is harder because what does a datetime looks like? It doesn't. How do you justify? How do you get someone to invest on it? You don't. So they are having a harder time, I believe, in adapting those APIs than Flutter. Because Flutter, you just see. You have the visual, you have the UI, people like what they see, and it is easier to fix what is wrong.
I must say that Flutter Marketing team, or I don't know who does Flutter Marketing, but they're way, way ahead of their technology or their user base, because you hear about Flutter so much, and I've just recently shared a post where I looked at Stack Overflow trends, and you see that basically Dart already overtook Kotlin on Stack Overflow.
Ooh.
And that's like, for me, it's like, it can't be, because people actually write a lot of production code in Kotlin, and there's not so many production applications written in Flutter. There are some, and Flutter gains a lot of traction. It has stratospheric uphill. It rises stratospherically quick inside the ecosystem, but still, there are not that many production projects in Flutter. So the marketing part of Flutter is definitely way ahead of its technological part and its user base. Or as Jake Wharton put it, Flutter team just got access to Uncle Larry's wallet. Basically, they have very big marketing budget and they use it. Nevertheless, I wouldn't, as you said, Flutter and Kotlin Multiplatform, they solve the same problem. And if you mentioned Kevin, something like, I wonder what you think about this. I met Kevin at a conference about 2 years ago, and we discussed also Kotlin Multiplatform. It was very new back then, like very, very new back then. And we discussed different cross-platform solutions. And I always thought, that was my idea, that if there will be cross-platform solution that will work long-term, that will get traction, that will be adopted, and people will actually use it, it must be native for at least one of the platforms. In other words, no one is going to use long-term solution that tries to bridge several platforms, because it just kind of, that's the law of leaky abstractions. That's not trivial abstraction, and whatever you try to do, it will leak and it will create problems, like React Native, like Ion, whatever it is. All these solutions create problems. Xamarin. So as far as I can tell, if we want to have one single cross-platform solution that people will actually use, it must be native for one of the platforms. And in this sense, Flutter, in my estimation, will really fly, only if we will also have Fuchsia. Because as we know, Flutter is the official framework for Fuchsia. So if Fuchsia rolls out, then we have Flutter, which is native to Fuchsia. And then let's say you can also run it on iOS and other platforms. And in this context, Kotlin multi-platform is interesting because supposedly at this point, no one says that, but it doesn't try to be native on any platform at all. And in my estimation, as far as I can tell, Android kind of progresses towards Kotlin multi-platform. In my estimation, in a year, 2 years tops, we will hear that basically Android applications become Kotlin multi-platform applications going forward. That's my guess. Okay.
May I make a comment?
Sure you
So I never thought about this. I need to think a bit more. But what I always think when I am in the communities and this kind of thing is like, who is the persona? Who are they making the framework for? So the bad thing about Kotlin multi-platform is that it is made for like JetBrains engineers, for people that are deep into the stack. And Flutter has the advantage that it is made for people that are pissed with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So it is hopefully, I really hope it will one day help replace or at least compete with JavaScript on the web. So it has a lot of JavaScript developers, and a lot of people are using because it is easier, it is better than what they have right now, even if the results are not perfect, it is better. So, and Kotlin multi-platform doesn't have this. It has just like, hey, Jake Wharton is going to use, but how many Jake Whartons are there in the world? Not many. How many apps have like 500,000 lines of code? Uber, and I can't name more than five apps.
No. There are quite a few.
I know.
If you would say 1 million lines of code, then yes, it's a big number. But 5,000 is not that uncommon.
No. Sorry. It was supposed to be 500,000.
Yeah, 500. I mean, okay, but I see what you get at. Yeah, definitely Flutter, in my estimation, in my opinion, has a very major head start over Kotlin multi-platform. It's already production ready, and it's much simpler to learn, and it has an established community already. So Kotlin multi-platform only starts there. But I totally expect Kotlin multi-platform to pick up like the pace, and the marketing of Kotlin multi-platform is going to become more prominent in the coming months, because I think what actually stopped them is Jetpack Compose. So Kotlin multi-platform, initially they say that, we don't want to share UI logic. We want just to share the business part of the application, everything except UI. And I think that they realized that if you want to have real cross-platform solution, you should also provide some option to share user interface. Because Kevin, and by the way, I agree with Kevin. Kevin says that, how did he put that? The history of shared user interface is the history of failure, and the history of shared logic is the history of computing, something like that.
Yes.
And I kind of agree with this statement, because I think that sharing user interface logic is very, very difficult, but maybe they will figure out how to do that. But in any way, it's inevitable that you need this solution because many applications, even especially simpler applications, they don't care. I mean, if you need just several fields and a button, you don't need anything fancy, then it's kind of a waste if you already share the business logic to write two different user interfaces. Like many Android developers, and I think many developers in general, just don't understand that for most users, if you provide value and your application is not super beautiful and it's not super smooth, they don't care. They don't care. You provide value for them. And only if your application is kind of in the user interface, kind of artistic sphere, then yeah, sure, you can bring ugly, slow application to people who expect to get the best in terms of user interface. But you can definitely bring it to business people, and there are lots of use cases for shared user interface logic, even if it's not optimal and it's not the quickest way, and it looks like less beautiful than native. Okay, great. I think one topic I want to touch upon, and that's about time, is your Figma plugin. You already mentioned it a couple of times. So just for people to understand what we're talking about here. As far as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we have Figma. And Figma is basically, it has two parts. First of all, it's like a cloud-based Photoshop in some sense. So designers design interfaces there. And on the back end, we have something like InVision and Zeppelin and stuff. So basically, developers can get specs, can get mockups from Figma, and it also generates CSS for people for whom it's relevant. So it's very nice. It's very nice platform. I use it quite a bit. And what you basically build is a plugin that takes Figma designs and outputs ready-to-use code that you can just pass into your Flutter application or your iOS application, and then you will get exactly the same UI as your designer intended it to be in Figma. So is that correct?
Yes, completely.
This sounds like, I mean, as someone who doesn't like user interface development, this sounds like something like take my money and shut up. I want that right now for Android. Please bring me one of these.
I am planning to do for Compose, but Compose is still very alpha. Maybe when it goes to beta, let's see. But I have had already, I think, 2 or 3 contributions into Compose, which I saw. I sent on Twitter to, I forgot the name, the guy that takes care of Compose, and I was like, hey,
Leland?
Yeah, Leland. And I was like, hey, Leland, how does Compose do this? And he was, no, I don't like. Okay, I open an issue for you. And 2 weeks later, someone from the Google team just fixed the issue and closed. And I was like, wow, that's going to make my plugin so much easier when I start writing.
Yeah, there's definitely something. I mean, I'm very skeptical about all this Google stuff and everything, but there's something very healthy that happened after Flutter came into the picture, because now we have competition between 2 internal teams at Google, and Android team had to ramp up their game. So we get better documentation lately. We have many libraries ported to GitHub, just like Flutter did, right? Flutter started this trend, and now we have many libraries from GitHub. We have a little bit more open communication with the Android teams, and people who work on Jetpack Compose, they seem to be like, they brought in a lot of new people. So these are not like heavyweight Googlers who kind of got accustomed to the way Google works, and developers are not important, like throw enough money on marketing and developers will be happy. No, these are real engineers who like to build stuff and they like to collaborate. So that's something really healthy that happened. And in my estimation, Flutter did that. So even if Flutter dies tomorrow, I think it already made a big impact in this sense, that it kind of prompted Google Android people to up their game. They realized that the way they worked for the past 10 years is not something that they can keep doing, because someone else at Google will just kind of outsmart them on developers relations side. So basically make developers really happy by helping them and providing stuff. But let's get back to your plugin, because first of all, how did you get the idea for that? Where did it come from?
It came from my website that I did for COVID-19 related information, which I did on April and start of May. And it was so, I got away from the web in 2013, 2014. So it was like 5-6 years away. And everything had changed. I didn't know anything again. It was everything different. And I couldn't even figure out how to center things in CSS. It is hard, believe me. And so I thought, okay, I just want like a rectangle with something inside. Why can't I have this, like I'm going to draw and I want to generate the code. Can I do this? So I started doing the plugin and it became a monster.
Okay. And why would you, basically you first of all, what's Tailwind CSS? Okay, let's start there.
Okay.
So your plugin works with Flutter SwiftUI. These two I know. What's Tailwind CSS?
Tailwind CSS is like Bootstrap, but different. It is a restrictive design system for CSS, so it has very, very, very strong defaults. So it helps you by limiting what you can do, so that you can't do wrong things or bad things or weird things. So you can have like 4 different types of corner roundness. You can't have a different one than what they give you, unless of course you customize and change things. But the default one is very, very strong. You can use any color you want.
Okay, it's some kind of.
Go on.
From what you tell, it sounds like it's some kind of a higher level abstraction over CSS. It's still CSS, but it kind of gives you additional restrictions, which again, you think that they are good because they kind of help you not to shoot yourself in the foot. Let's call it that.
Yeah. One of many issues I had when making the COVID website was that there were so many web frameworks. I ended up using one named Chakra UI, which was, it's not bad, but I didn't like it. Yeah, you don't lose anything. I hope I never have to use it again. So everybody I questioned on Twitter and everywhere, people were really like, oh, I use Tailwind. And I was like, okay, Tailwind is the framework to work with, so I'm going to support. I hope like I can help the community grow. I can help the framework be better.
Wow, that's amazing. And where okay, you say that Flutter team kind of didn't notice your plugin, but I would estimate that, I mean, it's a startup. I mean, I see here a very serious project that actually works. Well, first of all, does it work?
I don't understand.
Your plugin, does it work?
No.
I mean,
yes,
if I have some Figma designs, I use your plugin. Let's say, will I get correct Tailwind CSS, or I will get just some kind of row and I will need to fix it manually then?
No, so the way it is hard because there is no right or wrong. So when I released, it was like it did everything it should do, but maybe sometimes it would be nice for the user to add something here and there to kind of fix the layout. And I got a complaint about this because the person didn't know anything. So I changed to generate more code than it needs and now the worst thing that can happen is that you need to remove some code. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I want this to be resizable, so, and it is not. So you just need to remove a code.
Yeah, that's from what I heard. It's like called a day in the life of open source maintainer. You don't get paid, but everybody complains.
Yeah, but I am happier with the way it is right now. So you would get the layout very close to the input, and maybe if you want to maintain and make and optimize, you might remove some fields here and there, some padding that is not necessary, but it will work flawless.
Okay, I think we can just conclude discussion about your plugin with the statement that I personally I wait for this thing to be available for Compose at the very least. So, it sounds absolutely amazing that you will just, like in Figma, you already can kind of generate some kind of half-assed Android code, right? It has this kind of export to Android capability, just like it exports to CSS.
It can export, I think, only like colors or sizes. It
Exactly.
is very basic.
Exactly, how fast. In CSS, it's also, it exports the worst implementation that you can't actually use. So if your plugin does a decent job and spills out a decent code that I can just copy paste into my application and forget about that, well, that's a huge benefit. That's like amazing. And I think that maybe Compose team can just hire you, and then when Compose hits 1.0, and they will have this kind of plugin available and working for Jetpack Compose, it's one thing to say, guys, you can use this UI framework and build user interface for Android and iOS simultaneously. But it's totally different level of service to say you don't even need to build that. You just take your Figma mockups and you get the UI for free. That's like, wow. So if anyone from Google will listen to this podcast, I think, guys, you should just hire Bernardo yesterday.
Leland, please, Leland.
Bring them over. Bring this guy over Google. I think this plugin combined with Jetpack Compose can make all the difference. And actually, I think Android team at this point, they need all the help they can get, because they have very tough battle against Flutter. Flutter ecosystem constantly attracts more and more developers from Android. So if they want to retain and remain relevant, they need to up their game.
The issue I had in the plugin, not an issue, but I was hoping that it was exactly what you said. I was hoping maybe I can get some partnerships, maybe I can get involved, maybe I can add in my curriculum one day, I did my product is used in Microsoft, in Google, something like this. So I tried to have partnerships with Facebook for React Native, never replied. I tried with Microsoft because they now have their Fluent UI component for HTML, never responded. And the Tailwind people never even retweeted my plugin. So I guess people don't like so much partnerships. But
no. Let me correct you. It's very difficult. It's very difficult as an individual developer, especially one who doesn't have an established public persona like yourself. I mean, I know that you're a great developer. I've been following you, and I know that you're also a great guy. But when you want a partnership with a company, that's totally different level of even decision making. I mean, no one even if developers from Tailwind saw your plugin and they think that it's great, they come to their project manager and they tell them, there's this plugin, so she will just put a task in Jira, look at Bernardo's plugin in several months. So don't be discouraged by that. I think what you do is absolutely amazing. I mean, if you can make it work in Compose, take my money. Like, really, take money for that, because it is absolutely amazing. So don't get discouraged by that. I don't think that a lack of initial feedback from big companies and established organizations is something that should discourage you. I think it's absolutely amazing. And well, we're at 1 hour right now, and I promise you that it will be 1 hour. There is one additional topic that I really want to discuss with you, but only if you will allow me. Yeah, you have another 15 minutes?
I have.
Okay, so when you build this plugin, you tweeted at me something that absolutely amazed me. You tweeted at me your coverage report, your unit testing coverage report. And you have, if I'm not mistaken, 99.9%, right? Something like that?
Yeah, 99 point something percent.
More than 99% unit testing coverage. And for those of you who are not doing unit testing, it's challenging.
Hard.
It's challenging. And in my opinion, I know that you can get to 100% test coverage in all kinds of non-user interface related stuff. So if you implement some kind of strings manipulation, math processing, algorithms, even if you implement some kind of networking logic, you can kind of get there. It's not easy, especially if multi-threading is involved. Unit testing multi-threading is very difficult, but you can get there. But you have, as far as I can tell, something which is very UI heavy. You take in some kind of UI mockups in Figma and you spill out code that describes user interface. So could you please explain to me how you get to such a high test coverage in this system? Or maybe I just don't understand how this plugin works. And anyway, please let us know about your experience in unit testing and whether you think that your investment in getting to such a high number was worth it.
Okay, so Figma, I know you are thinking it works like magic, but it's very, very, very simple.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking, actually. It looks like magic.
They have it is one of the best APIs I've seen in my life. It is very, very, very nice. And the API has everything that you need. So I want the size. You can get from the API. You get everything from the API. So what I started doing was I kind of re-implemented their API with some changes so that I could test internally, because the only downside of their API is that it is untestable. You can't test in terminal. You can only, you need Figma to run your plugin. So that's a big downside, the only downside, I believe. So I re-implemented the whole thing. I made
You basically created mock Figma. You mocked Figma.
Yeah.
You created fake, what's called fake test double for Figma. That's what we did.
So I made all the I made a class to convert to this. I call it an intermediate representation, which is trending nowadays in Kotlin everywhere. And from the intermediate representation, I could do anything. I had like kind of hash maps or maps with a bunch of information, X, Y, text written and color and so on. And I just went ahead. There was a framework from Facebook which is named Jest to help testing. It works really fine. I am working with Flutter right now, trying to get coverage, and it just generates a file for you. On Jest, it prints all in different colors, the lines that are not covered. When there is an issue, it makes a diff like what was expected and what was the result. It's very beautiful. So the framework helped me a lot.
So what you basically say is that it was peanuts, it was easy, and you didn't do anything. There were tools that did everything. So basically nothing to be impressed by. Move along. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, no, the tools really helped me, because I'm not exactly sure if I would be able to do like this 99% of coverage if I was doing in other languages right now. the tools from Facebook are really, really, really amazing, are one of the best coverage tools ever. So they really helped me fix the bugs, because, oh, this line is not covered. So I went there, now I added a test for that line. Run again. Oh, now I need to do this. Done. I didn't need to generate a report and check online from a web page what was going on. I just, this line, let me fix. So it helped me a lot.
Yeah, does it do mutation testing?
What do you mean by mutation testing?
Mutation testing is, for example, you write your tests, and then there are automatic tools that go and change statements in your source code, in your production code, and they basically the goal of this, and then they run your test suite, and they verify that for each change in the production code, there's at least one test that fails, because the assumption is that if you can change anything in production code and one of the tests won't fail, it means that that part of the code is not really tested, not tested properly at the very least.
Yeah. So it checks if every if condition in every line of code was passed. That's what it does.
Yeah, I think you mean that it does line coverage and basically just branch coverage maybe as well.
But
I mean something different. But okay, let's leave it for another time. So it's absolutely amazing. Just let us know what did you get out of it, because actually, like, I'm a big advocate of unit testing, but I think I will never well, never is a strong word, but I mean, I would be very hesitant to recommend anyone to try to reach 100% coverage on almost anything except for nuclear reactors and maybe Tesla autopilots and stuff. So
for me it was important because I am dealing with layouts and nested layouts, and sometimes the children from the layout is going to have an unlimited size, but in order for it to have an unlimited size, the parent must have a limited size. So there were many issues everywhere, and I got into a point where I was like, okay, this is impossible to maintain, because if I change and if here, it changes the output from everywhere. So what should I do? Should I have a Figma file to be run every time I make a modification? That's impractical. So how do I make it work?
So you basically say that you couldn't scale the manual testing effort. The manual testing effort wouldn't scale. If you would do it manually, it would consume just too much of your time.
Yeah, it was not practical, because I changed one line of code. Will I spend 10 minutes checking if everything was okay? Maybe the layout was okay, but if I resized the page, it wouldn't be okay. So there were many issues everywhere, and it was too hard to test.
Okay, and while you developed, for example, you added tests, and then you continued developing your plugin, sometimes your tests failed and actually prevented you from making a mistake. Was this your experience?
I would change the test to be correct usually, but that helped me because I could see like, oh, there is a change that I didn't foresee, so I could either fix my code or fix the test and be happy with it.
Okay, so it basically gave you the sense of safety. So what safety net, right? Safety net that you could always be sure that your code works and you didn't have to go and manually compare stuff, visually, do some kind of visual inspection of the output.
Yep, there were some parts of the code which are extremely complex. There were like 4 or 5 conditions in the if, then another if with 5 for conditions, then a function with another 5 ifs. So the tests were really nice because they helped me like figure out what was really necessary and what was not. So a lot of times a lot of times I was like, oh, should I really add a test for this? Or should I just remove the code and be happy? So that's what I did. It helped me because I was like, this is not necessary. This is not adding value. It helped me clean up the code in a lot of places. It was very useful.
Yeah, well, I'm very glad that was your experience. It would be a shame if you would tell me like, yeah, I spent several months and never saw any benefit, and I'm like, oh, nothing to talk about.
The most weird thing that happened was like there was a typo in alignment, and the tests also had the typo, so you can't do anything when tests are wrong.
Yeah, that happens sometimes, bug here and there. Okay, Bernardo, I think we covered approximately 50% of what I wanted to discuss with you. And there are much more stuff, like the fact that you are doing your master's degree, right, in human-centric user interfaces or something. How did you call it?
Human-computer interaction.
Human-computer interaction. So that's basically user interfaces.
Yeah, a bit more than this.
Yeah, so you pursue your master's degree right now, and we didn't talk too much about your projects. And I saw this article that you wrote about Mavericks in the past, so I would be very curious.
My favorite thing
to hear about your experience. But unfortunately, I promised you that it will be 1 hour, and I don't want to take more of your precious time. So I will just leave it for other podcasters to invite you and to basically ask you about these very interesting topics. So just for the people who want to follow you, who want to find you, in my opinion, you are one of the more talented developers I've ever met, and you are basically, at this point, I think you are one of the, well, you are definitely an expert on Flutter and user interfaces in general. Whatever user interfaces, like Web, Flutter, Compose. Maybe you haven't tried Compose yet, but I expect you to get there very quickly. So if people want to follow you, want to hear your opinions, where do they go? Where do they find you?
They go to Bernardo Ferrari everywhere. That's my nickname in most social networks, Twitter, Reddit, GitHub. You can check me there. I hope one day Vesely will follow me on Twitter, but that's my Twitter profile. You don't?
I don't follow you? No.
You don't?
It's impossible. Okay, let me fix that right now, first of all.
I am very sure you don't, but that's my profile everywhere. Feel free to ask me questions. Today, someone from Brazil sent me a tweet like, hey, I want to help in your FigmaToCode. How can I help? And I was like, hey, there are many places, many things about Compose that I don't understand. You don't even need to make like the pull request. Just how do you deal with opacity, visibility, rotation in Compose? I don't know. Figure those things out and tell me. I will add to the plugin when I start doing Compose. And internet's incredible. So feel free to reach me out for anything, ideas, problems, solutions. I am there.
Yeah. So first of all, I indeed didn't follow you on Twitter. And I'm not sure how this happened because I constantly see you in my feed. I just wouldn't imagine that I don't follow you, but I guess we have enough Twitter buddies in common, and they constantly retweet your stuff, so I just constantly follow you even though I don't actually follow you. Now I fixed that. And the second part was basically that if there is anyone interested in Compose, who works with Compose already, who would like to leverage this knowledge to bring a little bit good into the world, then please consider taking a look at Bernardo's plugin and maybe contributing some help in Compose. And we know that it's very early, it's just hit alpha, but you know, alpha, by Google standards, alpha is almost production ready, so why not? The that's basically all. I really appreciate that you agreed to participate, and I appreciate your time. Again, very appreciate your perspective. I think it's super important. I like the fact that you have so much, you know so much about everything. You tried so many technologies, so you can actually compare different stuffs, and your perspective was very valuable, because I know that many developers sit on the fence and they don't know where to go. Kotlin, multi-platform, Flutter, remain native developer, or just fuck it all and I'm going into backend. So I hope that your perspective, the knowledge that you shared, will help others to make their own decision. So thank you very much. It was real fun.
Thank you very much, Vasily. Feel free to invite me anytime again. Hopefully your podcast is very successful. Hopefully next time I can talk with Code with Mint. I don't even know Mint.
Okay, Mitch, you should definitely invite Bernardo, and I think the invitation is on the way. And anyways, like once you will integrate Compose into your plugin, we will definitely talk about that, because as I told you, like for me, what you do sounds absolutely magical and something that I really want. I'm ready to pay for that. I hate UI work, so if there is a tool that can just take Figma designs and produce like usable code for me, this worth a lot of money. And I think Figma guys should definitely just snatch you, maybe either Compose or Figma. I don't know who will benefit from your services more, but that's definitely something that I would expect to happen in the near future. And if not, then good luck with your new job. I'm sure that you will just kill it.
Thank you very much. See you hopefully soon, now that you follow me.
Yeah, thanks, man. It was really fun.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all who wrote questions and comments. And here it is. Bernardo is our celebrity.
That's my professor, my coordinator.
Oh, nice.
That's
Do you know
my
her
friend.
as well?
That's my friend, yes.
Okay.
That's another colleague.
Who is this?
I don't know.
Okay, so at the very least, you've got one new follower, Fernando.
Thank you, Nick Hill.
Okay, great. I think Nick is part of our community as well, so it's our buddy right there. Okay, Bernardo, again, thank you very much. It was very interesting talking to you. I really appreciate your perspective, and see you next time.
See you.
Goodbye.